Give everybody a minute to come in. Good evening. Good evening. Happy fabulous Wednesday to you. All right. It's marriage moments. So if you guys are tuning in, please make sure to share and let everybody know that we're live on tonight for marriage moments. All right, guys. So excited to be back with you guys. It's been a while. So I pray that everybody's been doing well. And if this is your first time tuning in for Marriage Moments, let us know your name and where you're tuning in from. If it's your first time, okay? So I am super excited. We got some yummy stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to go ahead and get it started. It might just be me tonight. We'll see. My husband's supposed to be coming in. But let's see. All right. So on tonight, guys, I am super, super excited because we're talking about expectations in a marriage, expectations. And this is going to be very important. So whether you're married, where you've been married for years, or whether you've been, you want to get married, or you're newlyweds fresh into this thing, we're going to talk about expectations. It's very important that we have an understanding of what those expectations are. And if somebody is expecting something of you and you had no clue that they were looking for you to do or to be or to go, a lot of times you have issues when it comes into the relationship because you didn't know what was expected of you. And so on tonight, we're going to talk about expectations in your marriage. The Bible tells us that in all you're getting, get some understanding. And this is one of the biggest issues in a marriage, is that sometimes the husband and the wife don't quite have an understanding of what was really and truly expected of them. And so what does that turn into? That turns into a mess.com. That turns into issues in the tissues. That turns into junk in the trunk. That turns in, okay, we got to figure this thing out. We got to get it right before we go left. You go that left, I go this other left. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of times we have to figure out what is it that is expected of us. And I'm going to talk about some of the most common things that in a marriage, we didn't even know that our spouse was expecting that from us, or, vice versa, the other way. And so let's talk about this. If y'all are taking notes, y'all can jot this down. When a lot of times in a marriage, we have to understand what are reasonable expectations. And one of the biggest problems that I see a lot of people make is they assume that the other person knows. Well, I just assumed you knew that I wanted this, or I didn't like that, or that this was the way I am, or, and there are a lot of assumptions in a marriage. And so this is very important that while we're in the process of just assuming so many things, we need to make sure we have an understanding of some particular things, especially those things that are very, very important to your spouse. Number one, let's talk about one of the most common issues when it comes to expectations is the commitment in a marriage. Okay, what does commitment mean? Commitment means what you're bringing to the table. Well, let's say, for example, in a marriage, you expected the husband to be committed to doing X, Y, and Z. Let's talk about gender roles for a minute, okay? So sometimes you can have gender roles and expectation that this person is going to be committed to doing this. They're going to take out the trash. They're going to make sure the kids are picked up on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. They're going to wash cars. They're going to do all of these things. Well, here's the thing about that. If you never, ever talk about the expectation of the commitment, then you automatically assume that they just they're just going to do it. For example, the husband may automatically assume that you're going to cook every day just because you're the wife and that's your wifely duty is to come home and cook or to clean the house or just doing certain things. And so you got to figure out gender roles. You got to figure out what exactly it is that you are committed to doing so that your marriage can be better. Commitment can also mean figuring out. One of the things that you got to understand too is you got to figure out what's really important to that other person. And you got to be committed to be intentional about serving that person in whatever capacity that they need. You got to figure out what is important. What do they desire? Can they depend on you to do things without them even saying something? Because if you know, okay, one of your commitments is if my wife is tired, I'm going to be committed to taking some of the slack off of her, or my husband, if he comes in and he's tired, I'm committed to making sure that he has everything he needs. And so you have to really talk about what exactly are you guys committed to? What's important to you guys? What are almost like deal breakers, not necessarily deal breakers as in I'm going to get a divorce, but deal breakers as in I'm going to get upset and we're going to have this argument or we're going to have this issue, because that's almost like a deal breaker for me. That really ticked me off because you were not committed. You did not show yourself to be tied or connected to what was important to the other. And so you have to recognize, you have to understand what is it that each of you are committed to, and you got to talk about that, what the expectations of the commitment look like for each other. Okay. Another thing is verbal affection. Sometimes people expect in a relationship, in a marriage, sometimes we expect verbal affection and we don't get that verbal affection. What does verbal affection mean? You're beautiful. I love you. I appreciate you. And sometimes we as women, we love to hear that we're gorgeous or you're sexy, you're hot. And so the expectation is that we don't want to hear it out in the streets. We want to hear it from our loved one. We want to hear it from our own husband. We want to hear it from our spouse. And so a lot of times there's an expectation that I'm going to get verbal affection from my spouse. And then when that expectation is met, you have issues. And so, if that's something that is expected, a lot of this stuff, like far as your expectation goes, a lot of this stuff you have to be, you have to make sure that you communicate it, because this boils down to communication. What I'm telling you is that you got to figure out how to communicate your expectations. Verbal affection can be very important to some people in their marriage. Some men don't feel like they're the man. Some women don't feel loved. And so how do they want to feel that way? They want to hear it from their spouse. They want to know, they want to hear it from the words that come out of their mouth, and they want to sense it. They want to just pick up on it because they're expressing it. They're opening up their mouths and declaring who that person is to them. So if that person is gorgeous, if that person is beautiful, if that person is everything, if you love them, they want to hear love. Because here's the thing about marriage. A lot of times, some people didn't grow up, whether that's the husband or the wife, they didn't grow up hearing three very simple words: I love you, right? They didn't hear that a lot. And because they didn't hear it a lot, that means that many of them won't give it a lot. They won't say it. But they may very well be married to someone that needs to hear it, right? And so you got to make sure that if the expectation, there is some type of verbal affection, a verbal affirmation that is needed, make sure you communicate that with your spouse to let them know, I need to hear I need to hear that you love me. I need to hear that I float your boat. I need to hear that I'm sexy, that I'm beautiful, that I'm gorgeous. I need to hear that. I don't, because when they hear it in the street, whether it's a man or a woman, they're not moved by that because guess what? They get it all at home all the time. So their wife or their husband is constantly saying, you are the man, you are the woman, you are everything. And so you got to be mindful of what that person needs when it comes to verbal affection. Now, some marriages may need it more or less than others, but regardless, if it's needed, then we have to be intentional about making sure that that expectation is met on your particular end. All right. So the next thing about expectations, some people uh, expect compassion and empathy for each other's feelings, right? So, what do I mean by that? Let's say somebody has gone through something, all right, as a child. They have daddy issues, they have mama issues. And so, when things arise, it's like triggers from mama them or daddy them. When those triggers come up, then here's the thing about that. When those triggers come up, you got to be empathetic and be like, you know what, they really went through something, as a child, or they're going through something on their job right now, and I need to be compassionate about that. I need to be empathetic. I need to help them figure out how to get through this situation. So a lot of times, the expectation that is unspoken in a marriage is that many marriages need empathy, they need compassion, they need understanding. They need you to relate to what they're going through. If it was a hard day at work, you got to be compassionate and act like you care. You can't act like, okay, you know what? Well, my day was hard too, and just throw your weight on them when you're not even really trying to take on some of the weight that they're trying to express to you in this time, in this season. And so compassion is greatly, greatly needed, whether it's compassion from a hard day at work, whether it's compassion or not, of having mother or father issues, compassion on grace, or it also is, I guess it's like grace in figuring out how to be that man or that woman. This is where you grow together. You're empathetic with one another. You're compassionate with one another. And in all you're getting an understanding of what compassion, what type of empathy they need from you, what type of compassion they need from you for such a time as this. And so you've got to be intentional about being compassionate and empathetic when it comes to your spouse. That may be an unspoken expectation that they really need, and they're not really getting from you for such a time as this. Okay. Now, you also need to, there's an expectation, unless this is a very big one when it comes to men, respect for one another. I say more so men than women, because the Bible talks about women, how they're supposed to honor and respect their husbands. So men are wired for respect. And so there is an unspoken expectation that the wife is going to respect that husband. How do men feel disrespected? Well, when they feel like they can't be the man in their marriage, when they feel like every time they make a decision, you go behind them and change that decision or do something differently. They feel like the disrespect if you may go and talk to somebody else about something before you even talk to them. And so there are many different ways that disrespect can kind of manifest in your marriage. And the expectation is that husbands always want to be respected. Now, that does not mean that a wife does not want to feel that same respect, that same regard, because we want to feel. And ours is more so like a love more than a respect, because we want to feel loved. We want to feel honored. We want to feel empowered. We want to feel like we mean something to men. And so for a woman, it can be the same thing, but kind of in a different way. But the expectation is there. And when a spouse feels like there's some disrespect, then there's going to be some issues. And so you got to figure out how to show that respect, because that expectation is there. Now, a lot of times we need to have a sit down / come to Jesus meeting about what these expectations are. How can I show more respect to you? These are questions that you may ask your spouse, how can I be more honorable? How can I be more respectful? How can I help you feel like the man or the woman by just doing what you desire from me? And communication, again, it goes back to communication of these missing elements in marriages, why the expectations are not met, because they're not really communicated. And so we have to make sure that we are communicating the ways in which we feel like there's a disrespect or a disregard for one another. Now, if you don't ever address it, what you allow, I will say this, what you allow will continue. So if you continue to allow actions that make you feel like you're disrespected, or make you feel like you're not honored, that spouse is not going to know one way or the other. You may get an attitude or da-da-da-da, but if you never have a seat at the table to have a discussion of what respect and honor looks like to you, then they're going to miss the mark many, many more times. And so you have to be very careful. You have to be mindful of what respect looks like for your spouse. Now, another thing is that another expectation is you have to make sure that you're considerate of each other's differences. That's a big one. That's one of the beauties of being married. One of the beauties is that you're both so very different. And so the expectation is that you knew that we were this different before we got married. And so now that we're married, I expect you to still know that we're very different, but at the same time, we know how to compromise and we know how to come together. And so if you feel like your differences are pulling you apart and not really pulling you together, this is where you have to talk about it, because you have to continue to love the differences that you have. One may be more outspoken than the other. One may be more spontaneous than the other. But you got to understand that these differences is what make you strong, because where that one is weak, you have the strength to build them up. You have the strength to empower them. You have the strength to help them because of the differences that you have. And so you've got to figure out how to be okay with each other's differences, because in a marriage that is expected. Now, I'm not saying where your differences, where you have a weakness that is a difference. Like if you are a gambler or a smoker or a drinker and it's causing issues and you're saying, well, I'm different. That's no excuse for being that kind of different, right? That kind of different needs to change a habit and a redirection. What we're talking about is like what I mentioned earlier, where someone is more outspoken than the other, one is more spontaneous, one is flowing more in ministry than another, all of that. And so those are part of your differences. And that's how you have to figure out how to come together and look at each other's differences. Like if they're stronger in this area where you're weak, y'all can build each other up. But we're not talking about different as in I'm a smoker, you're not, I'm a drinker, you're not. Okay. That type of thing. So just be mindful of that, because that is a big deal. You have to expect the expectation is that you got to make sure that you guys are on the same page and have an understanding when it comes to differences and how you can use those differences to make each other strong. Okay. Next is spending quality time with each other. This is a big one. Spending quality time with each other. You got to understand that now, and I'm going to put this out there, while understanding that each spouse has other time commitments, right? So we know that each one lives a busy life, right? You got work, you got ministry, you got kids, you got all of this other extracurricular stuff going on. But the expectation is, regardless of what you have going on, that you guys make time for one another, right? So you got to lay it on the table. Like, how are we going to be committed to spending quality time with one another? And also, you may want to define, what is quality time? What does that look like? Like, your idea of quality time that may be the farthest thing from their mind. And so you're expecting them to think that the way you want to spend quality time is the way that they want to spend quality time, when that could be the furthest from the truth. So you got to figure out, okay, for me, quality time is, and you fill in the blank, date night, movie night. With everything going on with COVID-19, it's hard to really do like we used to do. But this is where you really have to get creative and figure out, can we do walks in the park? Can we do picnics? Go to the beach? Can we have candlelight dinners, movie time? Just throw in some things out there. You guys, we have to make sure that quality time in a marriage is huge. And so you have to expect quality time. Now, I'm not talking about time with the family, like, oh, all of us just hanging together. Yay, the kids and the spouse and all of this stuff. We're just having a good old family time. That is not what we're referring to here. What I'm talking about is you and me one-on-one. Sometimes that could be pillow talk. Like my husband and I, we love pillow talk. We love reading books together. We love just bouncing ideas off. That's quality time for us, right? But we know that for us, that's quality time. Whereas somebody else, well, I don't really look at that as quality time, like reading a book together or just having pillow talk at night. That's not what I define quality time. So somebody else may say that. But here's the thing. If you never talk about the expectation of what quality time looks like, chances are you'll never get that expectation fulfilled. And so you have to make sure that you guys are on the same wavelength, and all you're getting an understanding of what quality time looks like for each one. For the husband, quality time could be something totally different than the wife. But here's the beauty of compromise. When you compromise, you do things for that person because they look at that as quality time, whereas you look at it as like, yeah, no. So, for example, football season is in. I'm not a big football fanatic. My husband is. But because I know that he likes for me to watch football with him, I will sit down and watch football with him, eat popcorn, eat wings, shout, go, roll tide. I will do all of that. I will do yes, everything. Why? Because that's an expectation for him of what quality time looks like. Okay. And so for me, what I do is I just go in and I get in where I fit in. This is my time with him. We chilling, chillaxing, and enjoying a game together. So what are the expectations? What does quality time look like for each one of you? And whatever that quality time looks like, you got to be intentional about trying to meet the expectation of that other. Okay. So we're going over quite a few here. I'm going to give you a few more and then we're going to end at that. But spending quality time is a big thing. Now, another expectation is showing interest in each other and what each is involved with, including opinions, ideas, work, and activities. Like when your spouse sits and talks to you about their job or about this bright idea that they have, about things that they want to get involved in, the expectation is that you're listening. Like, listen, guys. Listening does not mean you're on the phone scrolling on Facebook, social media. Here's the biggest thing about hearing and listening. You can hear somebody say something, but because you're not listening to them, you're not mindful of what they're saying. Like my husband could be in the garage and I could hear him calling my name and saying something, but because I'm not listening to him, I don't know what he's saying, but I hear him. And so one of the things that there's an expectation in marriage is that when one has an idea, one has doubts, fears, insecurities, issues, a dream, a vision, a passion, that the expectation is a lot of times is that they can sit and talk to you about it. And you could be open and you can offer a feedback. You can offer suggestions. You can offer help with that. And so you have to make sure that when you're sitting and you're having these conversations, that you're able to share with them. You're able to impart. You're able to build them up. You're able to cheer them on, because that's what a spouse is looking for. They're looking, the expectation is that if I share vision with you, if I share dreams with you, if I share passion with you, that I got somebody that's like my ride or die. You know how people say ride or die, down like four flat tires. I got somebody that's in it to win it with me. I got somebody that can share this next level with me. And that when I have a serious discussion with them about something, they're sitting and they're listening. They're not just hearing me and distracted by social media, distracted by their phone, distracted by their computer. They're not. They're all in. Okay. And so this is one thing that you have to be mindful of, is that when your spouse shares with you, the expectation is that you're all in, you're listening, you're in sync, you're in tune with what they're saying. You can give them feedback. You can bounce ideas off of one another. Teamwork makes the dream work. And if you're not operating as a team, then what are you doing? The expectation is that as a married couple, that you're operating as one. We talked about oneness a lot. You're operating as one, because that's the expectation. So why would you be married to someone who's afraid to share dreams with you? Who's afraid to share vision with you? Because you're going to shut it down. Like every idea that they have is a bad idea, because every time they tell you, you always got something negative to say. If you find that you're the person that always got something negative to say when they share something with you, chances are, and I hate to say this, but this is where communication is a big deal. If they can't share with you, they'll find somebody to share with. And you don't want it to be the wrong person, okay? Go share, let it be your best friend, your homie from around the way, all right? But not another female. No one should ever take the spot of your spouse. They should be excited about sharing ideas and creativity, plans, dreams and visions with you. Okay. So let's just make sure we have an understanding of that. That is an expectation that sometimes isn't expressed, but it's there. And if it's not met, then guess what? Frustration sinks in. Okay. So another thing is physical closeness. All right. Physical closeness. This is expected, maybe more so for women than for men. I would say majority of the time. I'm not saying that men don't want physical closeness. I'm not talking sex yet. I'm just talking about physical closeness, hugging, holding hands, kissing here or there, and just physical gestures that suggest that I love you. And it doesn't even have to be about sex, right? So the expectation is for a woman, men, if you're listening, many women love physical gestures, like hug my neck, kiss me on the cheek, whisper I love you in my ear. All right. Women love physical gestures. And some women, because they may not have had that growing up, they're not used to that, they may shun away from stuff like that. And even some men, because that's not what they're used to, typically, they may shun away from it, right? And so you have to, if that's like an expectation for you and it's an issue for them, this is where you have to really sit down at the table and you got to say, well, honey, listen, I need physical touch. And it doesn't have to be sex. Like, I just need to know that you love me. And a lot of times hugging and just showing affection, caressing me, caressing my back, rubbing my neck, rubbing my feet, all of those things are simple gestures, simple physical gestures that let you know, listen, I love you, I'm here for you, and it doesn't even have to be about sex. But the next gesture is sex. The expectation is that you guys are very affectionate and it leads to sex. Men want sex a lot of times more than women. And so sometimes they don't get it. But you know what men do, and I've learned this from my husband, is that men won't tell the wives that they are sexually frustrated. What they do is they run and tell other men. They'll talk to their friends. They'll talk in their groups of whatever it is that they're sexually frustrated, but they're not telling their wives a lot of times that they're sexually frustrated. So this is where communication definitely has to come in. The expectation. What is the expectation of your spouse? Like whether it's the husband or the wife. Like how many times a week or you do you feel like that's enough sex for the week. And we're going to have a whole session on sex too as well. But we're just highlighting some things because these are unmet. There are so many unmet expectations in marriages when it comes to sex. Why? Because it's not vocalized. It's talked about, but not to the right person. And so, and then listen, if a spouse has some issues with sex with their spouse, there is a problem somewhere. You have to figure out if the expectation is that we're intimate a few times a week, but you only want to be intimate maybe once a week, once a month, every now and then. Somebody is sexually frustrated, but we got to figure out what the problem is. Like, a spouse may have been molested, may have been raped, may have been violated in some kind of way. And so they're not into a lot of that, right? Or it could just be something else. It could be they're having a hard time with something, and so they're not in the mood for that. But why are they depressed? Why are they could be bitter. They could be broken about something, unforgiving, depressed, anxious. A lot of negative emotions plays a part into whether or not they're ready to be sexually on a consistent basis with their spouse. But there again, these are unmet expectations in marriages that just don't really get talked about. They get brushed under the rug. And one thinks that the other is okay when they're really not. Like, that's a huge issue. Okay. And so this is something where you have to figure out, how can we be better sexually? How can I meet your needs? And is there any way that I could be better for you and for us? We have to ask those hard questions. What do you want? Okay. What do you need from me? How can I be a better wife? How can I be a better husband when it comes to intimacy in the bedroom? Okay. And so as a team, y'all can figure that out. And you don't have to have anybody interfere with what y'all got going on because you feel a lack in a certain area of your life. All that takes is a little, let's figure this out so that we can be better. And we're not going to give the enemy room to come in to destroy. Okay, because the Bible talks about sex, and we'll get into this a little bit more next time when my husband's able to jump on. That when the Bible talks about sex and how we should not stay apart from each other except for a time of fasting. And even in that, it has to be consensual. Like, you guys have to agree that we're fasting from being sexual with one another. And if there's no agreement, then technically you're not really supposed to do it. So the Bible says, and don't stay away from each other like that from long periods of time. He said, because you give room for the enemy to come in. And so you don't want to give the enemy a foothold because it turns into a stronghold. And that's how, you get adultery, you get all of fornication and all of that stuff comes in the picture now because you guys are staying away from each other a little bit too long, a little bit longer than you should. And so the expectation from one is we shouldn't be staying away from each other that long. We got to figure this thing out. But if nobody talks about it, if nobody addresses the issue, then guess what? There's an unmet expectation that the enemy is ready to come in and destroy your marriage. All right. So let's be mindful of that. And the last one I want to talk about is for tonight, and we'll have to go over the others at some other time, is generosity of thought, spirit, and action towards each other. You want to be generous, okay? One of the things that may not be expected, but here's the thing. Surprise them with generosity. Surprise them with gifts. Surprise them with cards. Surprise them with love notes. Surprise them, all right? So that may be an unmet expectation because they want you to be spontaneous and different and out the box. And you're not really surprising them with anything that indicates love, that indicates freshness, that indicates a new level. And so you want to get outside of the box with being generous to your spouse. And so they could go to work blushing and gushing and like dude calling old dude like, man, you never gonna man, my wife just really just shocking out on me. She bought me this, she did that for me. There should be another level of generosity that goes on in a marriage. This generosity challenges you how to get to another level of being better than you were the day before for your spouse. How are you going to outdo what you did yesterday or last week? It could be once a week where you just say, you know what, I'm just going to be different this week. I'm going to step outside the box and I'm going to do something for her. I'm going to do something for him that they're totally not expected, right? So if that's bringing flowers every week, they're writing a love note, a simple text message, shoot them a nice, sexy picture with a gesture on it. I mean, just be out the box and giving generously to your husband or to your wife so that whatever need they have, that you're meeting that need. You're always keeping it spicy. You're keeping it hot. You're keeping that person on their toes and ready to go to another level with you. Okay? So those are your first 10 unmet expectations in a marriage that I'm going to talk about tonight. And then the next time we come back, hopefully we'll go over the last few. My husband will be back with me then as well. So just keep these things in mind. Like there's some expectations out there, unmet expectations, unspoken expectations that are just out there. Nobody's saying nothing. We just kind of going with the flow and nobody's really doing what they should do. But we just this is just the way it is. And we have this it is what it is mentality. I don't care how long you've been together. You should never conform to an it is what it is mentality. Okay. Y'all are growing together, you're with purpose and on purpose. And you have to be intentional about meeting expectations. All right, guys, tag your best friend, tag somebody and say, hey, you got to go back and listen to this on expectations in a marriage. We'll be going over part 2 another time. I pray everyone has an amazing night and make sure to share this. All right. Love you guys. And we'll be back with another marriage moments coming your way soon.